All right, y'all, this is James with Quantum Mechanic. Today I want to talk about snap ring pliers, specifically these snap ring pliers from Harbor Freight, the Icon brands. These are actually very, very good. These are neat. They're made in America, which I really like. I've told you guys before, I don't really know why I like that, but I do. I feel like I'm supporting Americans. I don't know, call me crazy. Anyway, these are really nice. So compared to the ones I used to have, these are internal, external, pretty straightforward. Has replacement bits on here. If you ask me, the replacement bits are just a little bit too thick for some applications. And I find that to be true on pretty much every snap ring plier I've ever used, is that these are just a little bit too thick sometimes. So you just got to go through and grind them down with like a Dremel or something. Just make them like an RCH smaller, really. I mean, nothing too crazy. Comes with extra fasteners as well. So in case you lose the screws that hold these down, you have some extra ones. But these are really nice. They have really, really fine teeth in here that allows it to ratchet into place. As you guys can see that. And it's nice and smooth. This spring here that spreads them apart is nice and strong as well. So you guys can see that. Now, I like these a lot. They're definitely, it's really, really nice to use. And the case is nice too. I mean, it's an odd thing to brag about or to be happy about a case like this, but the case is actually very nice. It holds everything really nice. It's good and slim. You could take these pins out and you could just use the bottom bit if you wanted to. But I like to keep it in the case because it goes up with all my other blow molded cases over there. So they're really good. Now, these are the old ones I used to use. These are decent too. These are pretty old. The spring on this one is kind of nice. It's a little bit more chunky, I'd say. It's tough to really explain it. But the ratcheting mechanism isn't quite as deep if I were to compare it. So those are just a little bit more aggressive. And I've definitely had these for a while. They got some use in them, but you could tell they're just not quite as aggressive. So in use, in practice, you know, when you go to use these, if you bump this just the right way, it'll kind of dislodge and disconnect it. And then you got to kind of find that sweet spot, restart. So it just can be a pain in the butt. But these are nice. I've had them before. We're using these where that comes off. That happens pretty common. It happens on a lot of tools, actually. Usually what I'll do is I'll spray some glue in there. But I haven't had that issue on these. They just seem to fit a little bit better. And you can see I don't know if you could tell, but they kind of bulge up right there, right where my fingers are. They bulge up and then it narrows down on the actual grip. So I don't think you'd really have to pull on those quite hard to get the grips to come off. But I've had it happen here. It happens, you know, maybe once every other time or so that I use either the internal or external ones here. So it can be a pain in the ass, but you know, you deal with it and you move on. Anyway, these are nice. The issue I've had too with these is that the spring isn't, like I said, it's not very smooth. It's not super strong. So it's not always the case where it's doing it for me right now, but it's not always the case where you hit the button and it completely extends, right? Sometimes it kind of gets stuck. Not a big deal. Same thing with these. The tips I found were just a little too big out of the box, so I've had to really kind of grind them down to fit my needs. Now, this is what I use for 90% of things. And this is mostly like ball joints and suspension components, right? I'm not rebuilding transmissions or doing anything crazy. And this is how that lives with all these extra tits and biddles there. But I'll have to say that I like something like this. These I got from, I think, O'Reilly's or something like that. They're kind of a one-in, internal, external kind of thing. They're really nice. You can replace the bits really easily, which I appreciate. And you can store it in the handle, which is kind of neat. But I like these because of how small they are, right? You can really tell if you were to compare it, right, how small these little holes are, or how small these tips are. Okay, so even if I'm working on something that's kind of big, I'll use this because it spreads apart, about 1.5 inches or so. So you got good spread on something like this, and it's got enough force and power. And I don't feel like these are, one of the problems with cheap pliers is that they're really supposed to scissor like this. What you don't want to happen is you don't want them to separate like that or like that, okay? I don't know if that's easy to explain, but you just want them to slide past each other and this like scissor motion. So anyway, these I've had for a very long time, and they seem to do really well. You would think that because of how bulky it is, it might get in the way, but because it's such a smaller form factor, you know, compared to these other sets, it really does kind of, the length is what restricts you. It really does get into some nice tight deep areas. I've never had an issue with this spring coming off. The spring feels, you know, feels good, nice and springy. And like I said, I like how easy it is and quick it is to just change it over from internal external. And then you have these right angle bits as well. I think there's some 45 bits in here as well. Anyway, so those are nice. It's just really nice to be able to grab a snap ring plier. And then for something like this, especially if you're using it for heavy duty and it's tight and it's really hard to get into, you can separate or spread it or collapse it or whatever kind it is. And then you can take a pick and really stick it in between and then work it out that way. So anyway, just some little tips for you, whatever. Anyway, so I like these a lot, something like this. They're an all-in-one. I usually don't like all-in-one things because they're usually crap, but these Powerbuilt ones, either Walmart or O'Reilly's or something like that, definitely worth the buy on those. They're like $30 or something. These old ones, I think I got them from Harbor Freight a long time ago. I don't even know what brand they are. Pittsburgh, maybe. I don't think they make them anymore. These are good. They got me through a lot of hard times, but not my favorite. You know, they're just kind of a little bit gimmicky or kind of a little bit chunky. These are much more refined. Check that out. Much more refined. They just seem to work well. They're nice to use. They're easy to swap the heads over, and the heads they're actually, even though like I said they're a little bit bulky, they're machined well. They're you don't see a lot of defects in here. Okay, then they're stamped well with the which way to use them. Even these are made in the United States, which is, you know, kind of nice. These are a wide assortment of angles, so to speak. 90, 45, a little bit offset, and then straights. So really good. I highly recommend these for anybody in the market for some snap ring pliers. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I hope this helps you purchase a set in the future. All right, guys, have a good one.